We are doing good work here. If you know anyone in our community that is aging, and I'm 61, I am old. I started coming out in 73. I thought I was coming out, but I really didn't have that first special moment, and y'all know what I'm talking about, until 1977. So I'm old. I've still got a spark or two left in me. God help me. But I think what is so important, and Cannon talked about this, it's so important to not only talk about being relevant, but get out there, mentor. There's so many young kids that need mentoring. There are so many kids that could benefit from you working with them to just get through that, not only high school, but college. So I encourage you to take someone who needs your help, especially in an underprivileged community, someone that didn't have the support that maybe you had, or didn't have the courage and the gumption to get where you have gotten. And I will tell you, it will make a difference in your life. Move. I need to get back in yoga. Yeah, look at my hips. I need to work out more. Move. We all have to move. The First Lady says, let's move, let's move. And I think we have to, be actively engaged in our health, as Cannon worked out. So and let's look cute. Let's not get sloppy. Let's get up, get dressed. You know what I mean? There are days when I want to stay in my pajamas all day. I can binge watch anything or lose myself in a good book. So get up, get dressed, get out, engage. It hurts my feelings when I hear that people are alone, because you don't have to be. In Dallas, Fort Worth, and our expanded metroplex, read The Voice, find out what's going on. Oh my God, Thursday night there were 4 things that were fabulous in this community, and I hope they repeat all 4 of them, because they were excellent. Get out. Be part of the community as you age. All right, our next speaker, Bart Poche. Poche, Poche, Poche. I practiced. How did I do? Okay, Bart is probably the smartest man in the room. I hate that, those show-offs. But he is a doctoral student. He is just so smart. He's done so many things, and you're going to read about that in the bio. But he is going to be the man that gives us data, who is going to talk to us about research on aging. And he's good looking, and he's got energy, and I don't think he was even around in 1977, but here he is, Bart Poche.
And I'll try not to scream into it. That feels like a good level right there. Is that good? All right. So excited to be here with everyone this morning. What I hope we can do in this presentation is, one, I'm always tasked with getting us back on time. I am the worst person to get us back on time, but I'm going to try. So I'm setting my timer for 5 minutes in advance on it. The second thing I want to do is give a little bit of background that will hopefully set the stage and get our minds thinking a little bit about our breakout topics that are coming up. So we'll touch on a few things here that will relate to the topics that you're going to discuss in your sessions this morning. I want to share a lot of what's been happening in aging LGBT research. Some of this is investigation that we've been doing at the University of North Texas, and it's kind of a combination of existing literature that's out there and some stuff that's emerging now. So if you've been to a CFA presentation before, we've talked about some statistics that are important when it comes to the population here. A few of these pages are in your handbook, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them. But we'll start with just this number, 8.6 million people currently in the state of Texas aged 45 and up. This is a big number. If you break it down by age group, and you can sort of look here to find your cohort on this group, and the cohort you're soon moving into. And you can see the 371,000 LGBT people in Texas that are aged 40 and above. And we just stopped clicking. There we go. And then we can further break it down by county. So many of us here live in Collin County, and you can see by county and a projection out to the year 2040, the number of LGBT elders that we'll have in our community. And what's interesting is if you look at the bottom line there, the black line, this is the total in North Texas, all these counties combined. If you look at 2030, it's just shy of 200,000 LGBT people age 45 and over. There are about 280,000 people in the city of Plano and somewhere less than 200,000 in the city of Galveston. This is a whole North Texas town of LGBT people over the age of 45 at about 200,000 people. So this is a very large group of people. And as Cannon said, it's a group that sometimes has been neglected in terms of finance, in terms of research, in terms of advocacy and programming. So just to give you a little information about some of the marginalized groups within our aging LGBT community. A lot of this won't be new to many of you. 1 in 3 transgender people have been turned away from housing. There is over 1 murder a month of a trans person simply because of who they are in this country. Trans people are 4 times more likely than their cisgender counterparts to live below the poverty line. Our community is ethnically diverse. It's diverse in that we have LGBT families with children. We have people of all socioeconomic statuses, religious backgrounds. We have a significant number of people living with HIV, thank God, who have been able to survive the AIDS crisis through wonderful medication management that are now healthy, living with HIV. And many of us in the community have faced housing discrimination and discrimination in medical care. Those that move into assisted living facilities are facing this challenge of going back into the closet because they're uncomfortable or they're not welcome being who they are. And so if we look at 2030 again, just over 92 million people age 60 and over. 1 out of 4 people in this country will be age 60 and over. And this is in contrast to about 40 years ago where that number was 1 in 40. You had 40 people that were in the workforce, that were able to care for those in their community, 1 in 40 that were age 60 and over, and now we're at 1 in 4. And so this is a big challenge when it comes to economics, when it comes to community caregiving. And this is obviously one of the topics that we mostly talk about when we talk about the baby boomer group. 31% are going to be ethnic minorities. More than between 5 and 7 million of them will be LGBT, 55% will be women. So when we talk about LGBT research, there's a few things to share. One is that as time has gone on, it's gotten better at how the community is recognized. So we used to do research 50 years ago. All gay people were men. They were all white. They were usually middle-aged, and they were middle-class, upper-middle-class people. We know that's not true. There is tons of diversity within the LGBT community. When you do research, you have to do research on all parts of the LGBT community. So before we start talking about statistics and prevalence rates in the community, I just want to put these things, this is a small selection of aspects that a person identifies as in the community. And sexual minority status, sexual orientation, likely or may not be the most important thing that person identifies as. It may not be the biggest part of their identity to them. If they're an ethnic minority, their ethnicity might take greater precedence in terms of what their identity formation. And so if you look within each of these groups, you can break them down into even further subcategories. If we take a look at ethnicity, ethnicity is more than just the color of your skin or where you were born. It has to do with cultural norms and expectations. It has to do with language. It has to do with your ancestry. A lot of things other than just the group with whom you identify. If we take a look at gender identity, this is a lot more than am I a man, am I a woman? It has to do with your identified gender, the gender you were assigned at birth, your gender experience, your gender presentation, gender roles. If we take a look at sexual orientation, similarly diverse. Sexual orientation has a romantic component. It has a sexual component. It has an identity component. I missed a click there and started talking. Sorry about that. And other things I forgot to mention. So we can take a look at me. I generally have a monogamous commitment style. Romantically and sexually identify as gay. I am very single. I took the word tragically out because I didn't want to offend any single people. And the rest is none of your business. So the second thing when we talk about prevalence of negative mental health outcomes, psychological disorder, that sort of thing, there's bad research out there that often points people to think that there is something inherently wrong with being LGBT that makes us mentally ill. This is a holdover from when homosexuality, being transgender were considered mental disorders in the not so distant past. The truth is, this is the minority stress model, which is used in a lot of contexts. Elon Meyer adapted it for sexual minority communities, that explains why or where these negative mental health consequences come from. It has nothing to do with who you love, nothing to do with your gender. It has to do with this interaction with a society that stigmatizes, that stereotypes, that marginalizes LGBT people. And you encounter that enough, and you start to see, through your interaction with these stigmatizing events, you see things like increased shame and guilt over who you are, increased loneliness because you might feel like, I don't belong in this world, or this space is not for me. You see a decrease in self-esteem, decrease in security. You might be less likely to disclose your gender identity or sexual orientation because of those interactions. And these are the things that lead us to those problems with depression and stress and anxiety, not because of any inherent characteristic that we have. So second thing before we get into some of these statistics is that most people in the LGBT community are happy, healthy physically, healthy emotionally. They're out, they're proud of who they are, they have strong social networks. And yet, despite that being true, we are at greater risk for a lot of negative outcomes that are important for us to know, particularly those that work in advocacy within this group. So we'll start with talking about sexual and gender identity as it relates to the time in which you grew up, the time in which you discovered your own sexual and gender identity. And that may have been in youth for a lot of people. It might have been in middle age. It might have been last year for a lot of people. Identity formation with sexual orientation, I think they extended me to 1055. Yeah, I just got a note. So I'm going to go to 1056. It forms differently than things like ethnic minority, which we know for certain right away. We're surrounded by people that are our same ethnicity. Sexual orientation, identity formation happens differently. And if you think about, I won't read through these, but if you think about what was going on in terms of LGBT advocacy and what was going on politically at the time when people were coming of age or when they were identifying their sexual orientation, it says a lot. There was usually in each of these decades, there was like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. These events that really advanced the cause, and then others that unfortunately took us a step back. And if you think about even recently, a lot of folks in this room certainly remember a lot of these events. They remember things like gay bashing, and they remember lots of discriminating events that happens. Younger generations didn't experience a lot of that. So the recent gay bashings that we had in Oak Lawn, the shooting at the Pulse nightclub, these are in many ways much more tragic events for people that have not had these experiences previously. So we've had great legal advances. We've had greater visibility. We've begun to achieve this political equality, and these things are all wonderful. They're great advances. Unfortunately, they often come with these other consequences. And that once you have those legal advances, we begin to see this political backlash. And Ken talked earlier about some of those anti-LGBT bills that have come about. With that greater visibility comes greater scrutiny. People, now that we're more visible, people care about us more for some reason. They want to know more, and they want to compare us more. With political equality, you can say this about any minority group. With equality comes sometimes this feeling of loss of privilege from those who previously held this place of privilege. And that loss of privilege can sometimes be felt as discrimination. And so you might hear, for example, people calling religious discrimination what is truly LGBT equality. And the same can be said of some of the most recent advances like marriage equality, non-discrimination protection ordinances, and trans visibility. They have these other potential effects. So remember, most people are healthy and happy and secure and out. But we are, as an LGBT community, 2.5 times more likely than our straight counterparts to experience depression and anxiety and stress-related negative health outcomes. Whoops. We're twice as likely to be single or lonely and older age. 25% of LGBT people abuse drugs or alcohol as compared to about 10% of our straight counterparts. And lesbian and gay people are about 3 times more likely to attempt suicide or to have suicidal ideation. 40% of transgender people have attempted suicide or continue to have suicidal ideation. So as we look at some of those interactions and some of those negative consequences that have happened through that interaction, remember, that interaction with a stigmatizing society, these are some things that happen that can sort of change us in our behavior. And so when you think of internalized homophobia, this is the idea that I begin to believe those messages that society has been telling me. There is something wrong with me. I am different, and it's not maybe something that I should be proud of. This secret, semi-secret identities, this comes from Black feminist theory, the idea that I have more than one identity based on where I am and who I'm talking to. Code switching, this comes from linguistic study. It used to be about changes in language with LGBT folks. It has to do with our change in language, words that we use, but also our behavior, our mannerisms, things that might give away our sexual or gender identity, that for whatever reason we choose to not draw attention to ourselves. Social vigilance, in a room where we recognize that we're the only person who is gay, lesbian, bisexual, straight, we become very hyper aware of that, and we come to expect that someone is we're going to see some kind of stigmatizing reaction. We're going to see people talking behind our backs. We're going to hear some kind of comment. And so we're kind of vigilant and expecting that. And then we have this feeling of otherness, that I'm the only one, or there's only a small group of us, and this place is not for us. And as you might imagine, that's a really stressful day if that's how you encounter the world, and that's all the things that are occupying your mind. And it's easy to understand why we have this greater incidence of stress and minority stress. If you look at our relationships as compared to straight people, we do have strong ties in our communities oftentimes. We have these chosen families that are very helpful to replace what, in many cases, are a lack of biological families, or perhaps those that might be estranged from their children. But we might have a lack of dependent caregivers. We're more likely, as I said, to be single, and we do have a greater risk of isolation as a result. As we age, we have to encounter challenges with resources and ability. We might have decreased physical mobility. We might have problems with transportation if we drive or not. Scarcity of community spaces and events, and few LGBT-specific community housing options, which is something that Cannon also talked about and we'll be talking a lot about in our breakout session. And of course, as you might expect, this can lead to loneliness, which has a lot of negative mental health outcomes. In the area of infrastructure and services, something else we'll talk about certainly in the breakout sessions, Kenan mentioned this invisibility, the fact that we're often not counted. We're not asked or given an opportunity even to disclose about our identity. And so it's very difficult to focus on a community if you don't know who they are, where they are, how many of them there are. A lack of culturally competent care as a result of that invisibility, that people just might not think about the community, or because there is genuine active resistance to creating welcoming spaces and programs for LGBT people. And then again, community spaces, not enough. They're not welcoming enough. We don't feel comfortable. And these are all challenges to aging at home or aging within the community. So our non-traditional family structures might make it less likely that we're able to stay at home as long as we would like. They might make it, though we have these strong chosen families, we're often the same generation, and so we age together and we encounter a lot of the same challenges related to aging together. And so we might not be able to help each other as much as, say, a child who's 20 years younger could have. And then, of course, we have this within community stigmatization within the LGBT community about age. We put a premium on beauty, on physical fitness and physical agility, and that creates a bit of a line within the LGBT community between our oldest and youngest generations. And that has some negative consequences. So that line means that the advocacy efforts that many of the people in this room undertook in years past, those stories, those skills are not being passed down to younger generations who have a lot of work of them ahead, as Ken and Sister would be sad to learn, that there is still a lot of work to do. There's a lot of activism that's needed, and we need to keep that connection to our history that could be lost as a result of this divide. So again, I won't go into too much of these legal concerns. We'll talk about those, but marriage equality has been an incredible advancement, but this is a community of people used to not being legally married, right? And so everyone didn't go get married immediately once it became legal, and so many people are still missing out on those 1,000+ federal benefits that are provided through marriage. And so that does cause some potential problems, particularly at death when it comes to wills and decisions about health care and those sorts of things for folks that are not married. There is a lack of protections against discrimination at the state level and the federal level. Thankfully, in Plano, we have a non-discrimination ordinance similar in Dallas and other cities, but there are a large number of people, about 429,000 in Texas, that live in a place where they don't have any municipal, state, or federal non-discrimination protections, and that's a big problem. And all of us live in a state where we had 116 anti-LGBT bills last year in the country. 20 of them were in Texas, a state whose majority political party still supports reparative therapy for gay people, that doesn't want to allow transgender people to use a public restroom, that doesn't, in fact, believe that transgender people exist, that there's such a thing. And so, yeah, we're missing some legal protections, too, in Texas. So why in the world are we still alive, and why are we here today, and why do we still assemble, and why do we even try, and how have we made it this far? And the answer is there is tremendous resilience in our community after spending a lifetime of enduring that discrimination and overcoming that inequality and making those political advances. It builds up this very strong will and resilience, and we can take a lot. But that is not the solution. Being resilient and overcoming stigma and discrimination isn't the solution to stigma and discrimination. The solution is you eradicate it. We don't want the upcoming generations to have to build up this same strength from overcoming the same discrimination and challenges that many folks in the room have had to overcome. It is, however, and there's a lot of research that supports this much stronger sense of resiliency as a characteristic within LGBT people than as compared to straight counterparts because of that same drive. So what do we do next? Well, we're going to chat about it. So we're going to move into breakout sessions soon, and we're going to talk about some of these specific problems, and I think you'll probably tell us exactly how we'll be organizing those conversations. So thank you very much, and look forward to talking to you in the next session.